Hello and a warm welcome to the open space of application development within SAP BTP. Today we have the kickoff of this short series. We have 5 episodes planned for you within this series to provide you deep dives into the various services that we have for you in BTP. And today we have Boris Saska, product manager at SAP, who will provide further information on what you can do with in BTP, and he will also provide an overview and the latest news on how you can easily foster the agile cloud development on SAP BTP with DevOps principles, and particularly for SAP-specific use cases. But before I hand over to Boris, I would like to again provide a short overview of upcoming virtual events and on-site events that might also be of interest for you. So first of all, we have the Universe of SAP BTP in a Nutshell. That is a series which is running until July 4th. I will post the link to it in the chat later on. Of course, our current series, and then we have a 2-hour session full of tips and tricks and exercises. The Hitchhiker's Guide to SAP Fiori user experience and its technologies. I will also share the link in the chat. And then in case you should be in Dublin next week on April 25th, there is a customer forum, an on-site event on BTP. Also, I would like to make you aware of the Garage series, of the next Garage series, which will be in May, on May 3rd, with the topic, use SAP Build Apps to build side-by-side UI extensions for SAP S/4HANA. And next, I would like to provide a quick overview of the various SAP practitioner forums all around SAP BTP that might be of interest for you. So as you can see, every first Wednesday, there's the Garage series. Every third Wednesday, there's Screen Personas. Every third Thursday, SAP Fiori. And then we have a practitioner forum on BTP. And every second Tuesday, SAP Build Process Automation. I will share the link to the Garage series also in the chat in a second. And with this, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Boris Zarska. Boris, over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining and for having me. Really looking forward to our session today. And my name is Boris Zarska. I'm product manager at SAP, and I'm in charge of surprise DevOps with SAP Business Technology Platform and forging the overall DevOps story with a lot of colleagues, of course. And then, today I plan to provide this holistic overview of our offering. For those of you who should already know the story, I will point out the latest news, of course. I will give also a demo of our continuous integration and delivery offering. And the presentation is a very good start into the series because, I will really touch upon all the topics we will cover. The other ones I will also mention at the end then, and there you can expect to get more demos of the different topics that we will cover as part of our overall offering. But let's start with the overview, and for that I will share my screen. Hope it's coming up for you. And DevOps with SAP BTP. I will first start with a short positioning and motivation, what it's all about, then outline the actual approach and give you further insights around that. In the end, we will have hopefully some time also for questions as well. So if you should have questions, please do not hesitate to bring them up in the chat and we can go through them at the end. But let's first start with business technology platform. And yeah, as you might know, I mean, business technology platform does provide a platform for our portfolio of different offerings with which we want to enable you to become intelligent, sustainable enterprises. And yeah, as foundation, the business technology platform allows you to create personalized experiences, build faster with business context, and also run with confidence on a trusted enterprise-grade platform. And here you see already those different aspects, right? Also here we see, okay, we do enable development, but also operations, right? So also here the different aspects come already in. And we do that with 5 pillars. One is application development, not surprisingly, but we have also automation capabilities for optimizing business processes, for example. We have integration capabilities for hybrid flows in SAP and non-SAP landscapes, where you have data flows across different providers. We have data and analytics, which allow you to make best purpose out of the data, and artificial intelligence capabilities as well. And when we break that further down, we see different capabilities. Here, I want to especially stress those around application development, where we have different development capabilities, but also down there, you see we have here, oops, sorry, that was too fast. Sorry, here we have the DevOps capability as well, being part of the overall offering. So far, so good. But let's maybe start with a short motivation, what DevOps is all about, to get everyone on the same page. And here I normally take that example here, where we have development and operations as key representatives of the teams that provide or contribute to the success of a product and their view on production. And here, of course, we see that development owns the application, whereas the operations teams own the runtime. And development might be measured by the number of increments. So they want to change things fast because that's what they are measured by. Whereas operations might be measured by stability of the platform, never touch a running system. So they rather want to keep everything stable. And that's an archetype of typical conflicts we see in siloed organizations where we have different goals and speak different languages. And now DevOps is an approach to overcome those silos by having cross-functional teams. And here I've shown one definition, because there are a lot of different definitions out there, but this one here is from Ken Margaret from ThoughtWorks, according to which DevOps is a culture where people, regardless of title or background, work together to imagine, develop, deploy, and finally operate a system. And first of all, DevOps is a cultural approach, so it's not a product you can buy, implement, and you're done. It's that you really have to come up with enabling your teams and having a positive failure culture and also enable them and overall work together to optimize by time. So it's really a journey, right? It's not something you can come up overnight. Nevertheless, it's also clear that there are tools that help you on this journey. And that's of course what is all about today as well, where we will also point out some of the tools we do bring as part of our business technology platform that shall help you to make the first steps, gain experience, and evolve by time towards really higher ratings of DevOps capabilities. And the other aspect here highlighted is this working together. That's just again stressing this cross-functional team, basically. I have development, I have operations, I have quality managers, I have user assistants, whatever. And all those should come together into this cross-functional team with common goals, speaking a common language, and work together to really come up with the application and evolve it by time. Overall, of course, we all want to have happier customers. I mean, that's not surprising. I mean, it is true for SAP, of course. But also for you, if you want to come up with applications for your lines of business, for example. And how we do that? By providing better software, meaning reacting fast on feedback. For example, we can check out, okay, what parts are used heavily, which are maybe not used at all or only very seldomly. And we can see, okay, where should we put focus on? Where should we further invest to improve the situation to overall make all the processes more smooth. And important that it really does work out is that we have the capability to also deploy faster. Otherwise, we would gather feedback, and if it then takes months until you realize those increments, then will not lead to higher end user satisfaction. And baseline for all this is that we have quality built in. Again, otherwise we come up with a lot of changes, which maybe bring new features, but they might open up new additional issues. And again, this will also not lead to higher end user satisfaction. So the challenge is really to come up with a process where we say, okay, inherent part of that process is really that you can deploy faster, but with quality built in. And how shall we do that now? For that, let's take a brief look at the deployment pipeline, where you come up with a requirement, develop it, perform builds, perform tests on different levels, deploy it and release it to production, and then operate it. And with that, close several feedback loops. So the idea is quite simple to automate large parts of this deployment pipeline. Yes?
May I interrupt quickly?
Sure.
We have 2 comments that it's the audio is a bit muffled. I don't know whether you can change your micro.
Okay, let me check. You can hear me, right, Tanya?
I can hear you. For me, it's fine, but our attendees say it's a bit muffled. Perhaps you can continue and they can tell whether
I can switch, of course, to another one. I can switch also to the camera. Let me just do that. And it would be great if you can provide feedback if it's better then. Let me just switch here to the...
Would be great. Tina, Ian, Ashok says it's clear for him. So, oh, I cannot hear you at all. Boris, now you're gone. Can you hear me? Boris, no, it's. We cannot hear you. Not at all. It was better before.
So now I'm back on the microphone. Is that still audible then?
For me, it is clear. It was better before. So
okay.
Yeah.
So let me just try it again. I will just switch back again to the webcam and just ping me again if it does not work out, right? Okay, let's give it another try. I will switch back.
No, you're gone.
Okay, sorry.
No,
now it's back here with that one. I really have to apologize. So that is really strange that it does sometimes work and sometimes not. But apparently, yeah, we have to live with that muffled sound. Sorry for that. Yeah, I can maybe just get it a little bit closer to.
I got the feedback that it's okay now.
Sorry. Most probably the people will be annoyed by the sound. Sorry. Yeah, just continue. If it's too worse, just get back. Yeah, how do we do that? I mean, for that, we introduce a so-called continuous integration and delivery service. I mean, that's the idea that just triggers an automated pipeline, meaning automatically performing those steps whenever you submit changes to a central source code repository. And with that, you open up the door for a lot of benefits this more agile approach does bring. First of all, you have smaller increments. With that, you have reduced risks instead of piling up a lot of changes with a lot of interdependencies. As you can foster that also automated test cases are part of the pipeline and only those are considered to be propagated, you make sure that only qualified changes are considered to get propagated. And with that, you can also increase overall code quality. And as you get direct feedback on the outcome of your changes, you have also tighter feedback loops. And as part of the test cases, you can also anchor compliance, meaning saying, okay, not only perform unit tests, making sure that the single increment does what it shall do, but also make sure that, for example, security aspects are covered with corresponding source code scans and so on, or that you do not use any third-party tools or libraries that have vulnerabilities or something like that included. So that's all something you can foster as part of this automated process as well. And in the end, delivery becomes part of the daily routine. And so far, that's common sense, I would say. I mean, that's part of the overall agile approach modern developmenters bring, and that's also what modern talents bring from universities, right? I mean, also, if you want to bring in new talents into your teams, it's of course also important that you can say, okay, yeah, we also apply to those modern principles. And when we now take a look at the SAP environment, I typically use this scenario, this overview slide here of the extensibility concept for SAP S/4HANA, where we see, okay, yeah, we have, of course, still key user extensibility where you can come up with custom fields. We have, for a certain period of time, also classical extensibility, like we did it in the past, where you have ABAP development as well. Nevertheless, we want to reduce that by time. That's why it's already drawn a little bit smaller, right? I mean, the reality would be that it's much bigger, I would say, but that's the goal. The goal is to follow the paradigm to keep the core clean, meaning that instead of using classical extensibility, where you use SAP delivered code and adapt it according to your needs, that we then use here, for example, developer extensibility with integrated steampunk, but also for loosely coupled scenarios, this side-by-side extensibility where SAP Business Technology Platform comes into play. And the reason for that is if you do that, then it's much easier to apply here updates, because there you don't have to consider any longer those interdependencies to your own extensions, but can rely on SAP standard code and have the differentiating code for you rather put side by side, so to say. And of course, you can also do that more non-disruptively, where you say, okay, you have your stuff running on the back end, but come up with innovating stuff here also side by side. That's of course also an advantage here. And from that end, yeah, business technology platform comes into play also with a lot of customers that are on the transition towards SAP S/4HANA. With BTP, of course, cloud comes in. And when you say, okay, I bring in cloud, then of course, why not benefit from the standard modern approaches cloud development does normally bring? So let's tackle also DevOps. And yeah, we have a lot of customers to do that as part of the cloud transformation. Nevertheless, of course, that can be a little bit challenging because, as you have heard, DevOps is rather a cultural aspect, cultural approach. So it's really not something you can do overnight or, yeah, en passant with another transformation. Nevertheless, we see an approach where we say, okay, we want to allow you a very low entry barrier that allows you to really benefit from that agile approach, also as part of your cloud transformation, gain first experience, and then evolve as you go. How do we want to do that? I mean, for that, we have here the ambition to make it easy for you to benefit from general DevOps principles for your apps running on BTP. Also, for example, as part of a cloud transformation. Of course, it's not a must, but yeah, also here we want to tackle that. How do we want to do that? First of all, we want to offer a very easy start with a low entry barrier. We want to offer a highly integrated offering, which makes it easy to, yeah, start with development and also delivery, and then also later operations, so that this all goes hand in hand for your SAP-specific use cases. And many of you might have already invested into processes around SAP software. And here we want to say, okay, we want to offer you an option that allows you to smoothly integrate into those existing processes if you like to. Of course, it's not a must. You can, of course, have also other offerings. So we are also open there. But if you should have invested, then yeah, you can have one approach for your BTP changes and also for your SAP S/4HANA changes, for example. So that's also important. And all, of course, with a clear focus on SAP use cases. There are a lot of different offerings out there, no question about it. But here with Business Technology Platform, we want to provide the best approach for SAP-specific use cases. And we will come back to that slide and we will visit after I have presented our offering if we have reached that goal at the end of the presentation. To outline now our approach, I use that slide here, where we see, okay, we have here business technology platform with 3 sub-accounts, one for development, one for testing, quality assurance, or pre-production, whatever you want to call it, depends a little bit on how you'd handle that, and finally the production sub-account. And the first thing we have to do is we have to set up continuous integration server, because that's the driver for the agility we want to come up with. And here our offering is this pipeline as a service approach, where we say, okay, we have here something we can use without own infrastructure. We still rely on a Git-based source code repository like GitHub or GitLab or Azure repos or something like that. There we don't have an own offering in place, at least for Cloud Foundry, for example, not. Why is that? Because there we don't see really the option that we can come up with differentiating things. Git-based source code repositories, from my point of view, are rather commodity nowadays, where we can nevertheless bring in differentiating benefits is with the CICD server. That's why we have that own offering. So the goal is to come up, or to allow you to come up with a pipeline for SAP-specific use cases in minutes. Nevertheless, of course, we have to be open here as well. So you can also use open source or third party. And also there we want to support you. Just thinking of, if you should have already experienced with DevOps in non-SAP environments and now say, okay, we now want to extend it also to SAP scenarios, then of course, that should also be possible without having to have a parallel approach, which would not make sense, right? To break that a little bit further down, we target, of course, here, especially customers with another background transitioning into the cloud, but we have also cloud native customers that see value in that service. The important thing is that we have a managed infrastructure for the CICD service. We offer an UI-based job editor, meaning you can directly configure the pipeline in an UI. Optionally, you can use also configuration as code, but that's only optional. And we have that high integration. So you have a service with direct support from SAP. Instead of showing that on slide, let me give you a short, brief demo on that, because, I think that makes it much easier to grasp. Let me, for that one, just bring up here my service. Oh, sorry. Of course, it did time out, but no problem. Maybe I just also make it a little bit bigger for you. You see, it's pretty simple. What we do offer in the service is only 3 things. You store credentials. For example, you have here, for example, a webhook for another service, or you have here a service key for your repository, which you can just store inside the service as well. Then you connect your repository. Pretty simple. You give it a name. Then you use the clone URL you have, for example, from the Git repository, copy it over. You select then the corresponding credentials. If you should have a repository running on-prem, you can also specify a cloud connector, and that's it. I mean, we can connect to all Git-based repositories. On top, you can configure a webhook, meaning webhook just means when you ever submit something to the repository, this then triggers automatically a pipeline run on the continuous integration and delivery service. And here we support GitHub, Bitbucket, Cloud and Server, GitLab, Azure repos. Again, very simple. You just specify the service, then specify the corresponding credentials, and then have a webhook configured. The main part are the jobs, meaning the pipelines. And here it's also pretty straightforward. We just use a new one here. Again, I have a name, a description. I specify which repository I want to use. I can specify which branch shall be used. And here, for example, I can also use feature wildcards. So saying, okay, several branches that all are used for feature development trigger this single pipeline, for example. And here I have the different pipeline templates. And here we cover a lot of typical SAP use cases, be it for cloud application programming model, where you build extensions on BTP for your backend systems, or SAP Fiori, where you can come up with compelling UIs no matter if they run on Neo, on Cloud Foundry, or on other front-end server. We have container-based applications. If you use the Kuma environment with a Kubernetes-based environment, and we have integration suite artifacts. And in the end, what you specify is here we say, okay, we want to have the UI configuration, or the configuration as code. That's of course straightforward. You specify here the build details. You can have here already code checks just turned on, right? Like here, Maven static code checks or lint checks. You can, of course, specify unit tests you want to perform. We can then perform WebDriver IO tests if you have corresponding test cases you want to perform there. For compliance, we have directly integrated Sonar Cube scans, so that perform also source code scans, also in terms of static code checks and so on. And finally, you can deploy them directly to BTP, to another sub-account, or trigger a transport. Also very straight out of the line. Just say, okay, please trigger a transport in my test sub-account. Here I have my corresponding TMS credentials stored inside the credentials. And finally, you can also get notified about the outcome of your pipeline runs. Very straightforward. And here I have one example. For example, here I have one pipeline here for connected to a simple repository. Let me just bring that up. Sorry, it does not allow me to do that in that view here. It's very simple. And here I just want to simulate a development where I just say, okay, here I have my package JSON. Let's just briefly edit that one. I'm logged in. Yes. Sorry, I did not want to do that. I wanted to go here to that one here, not to the change, but to the actually UI, to just change here the version, for example. As it's just for demo purpose, I just directly submit to the main branch. And if we now go to the service, you see already here commit is triggered then by the repository. I did not start anything manually. And yeah, if you go into that, you see just the outcome, what happened, and can then, of course, yeah, get corresponding log information. So very simple. You see, it's pretty straightforward to really connect the repository and then trigger really a pipeline for your use cases. What are the latest news for the services? For the service, I mean, yeah, as you have seen, we have now enabled this notification, which you can directly do from the UI. Also, this Fiori for ABAP frontend server is one of the latest pipelines we have added. Also, this WebDriver has been coming up. Here we had in former times another framework which has been deprecated, but of course we constantly update those. And yeah, we also enabled first steps into adding some flexibility. Not that you can all add own stages, but that for single stages you can just say, okay, instead of WebDriver IO or instead of Sonar Cube scans, I want to have 45 scans or something like that. So that you get a certain level of freedom, not completely open, because we still want to have that opinionated path that makes it as smooth as possible for you to set it up, but still with some degrees of freedom. And that's something we plan to come up in the course of this year. The other offering is Project Piper. That's an open source offering. And again, that's rather targeting customers that have experience with CICD or are willing to build it up. You have to bring an own infrastructure, and yeah, you get building blocks that allow you then to build an own pipeline. But here again, you have to come up with the environment and yeah, also keep it up and running. You have to build a pipeline and then also keep it up. So that's under your charge, and there's only community support because that's an open source offering, whereas the continuous integration delivery service is a service from SAP with direct support. I mean, that's just the difference. Nevertheless, I mean, Project Piper is also heavily used. I mean, we have a lot of usage inside and outside of SAP, so there's quite a large community available there as well. What does it offer? We have pipeline templates you can download from GitHub, for example. We have a library of pipeline steps you can use to extend or adapt those pipeline templates or come up with own pipelines. We have typical scenarios, meaning end-to-end use cases of typical SAP use cases in form of documentation where you can then copy over, for example, code snippets that shall also ease you to make the first steps there. And we have containerized tools, meaning Docker images you can download from GitHub there. And here's one example, the general purpose pipeline you can download. And here you see some kind of Jenkins pipeline that you can use there. We did focus in the beginning on Jenkins because at that time we considered it as some kind of de facto standard, but that did evolve by time. And yeah, we now also support other ones. I will come to that in a second. Here you see what we do have. I mean, we have, for example, migrated the step library to Golang, which makes it quite much easier to use that also in other frameworks. We have those containerized tools, which you can also, for example, use on Azure DevOps. Here's a corresponding blog post on how you can do that. We have GitHub Action. You can, again, download here from GitHub. And there's also external information available, like here from Amazon, around using Amazon DevOps tools for SAP scenarios. So again, either pipeline as a service, very low entry barrier, or yeah, tool set which allows you to build up your pipeline on your own, but nevertheless with a direct connection then to SAP scenarios. Okay, that is the one thing. The other thing is this is then used by the actual development team to perform the developments. Here we have, for example, for Cloud Foundry, the Business Application Studio. Sorry, my phone is not here. Sorry for that. That's, for example, an example on Cloud Foundry, where we have this modern and powerful development environment, which you can use to come up with your applications. But also here we are open. You can use Eclipse or Microsoft Visual Studio Code. Of course, that's also clear. Nevertheless, this is, of course, a simplified view, again, stressing Cloud Foundry environments. When you take a look at other environments, for Neo, you would, for example, use Web IDE. For ABAP environment of BTP, you would still use the ABAP development tools and then corresponding components. We would have Kyma as runtime. We would have SAP Integration Suite with, of course, Web UI. I'm sorry, I just have to switch off. Sorry for that. I hope it's not someone from you calling me now that my microphone still does not work. But if so, sorry for that. The latest improvement we have done here for the web application, for the Business Application Studio is this integration with also CICD service. So also from the Business Application Studio, you can directly create and also monitor then the outcome of your pipeline runs with the continuous integration and delivery service. So also here we have a direct integration then in place. Overall, the process is, again, straightforward, as mentioned before, meaning you push your changes into this Git-based repository, which then triggers the CI/CD pipeline, like the continuous integration delivery service, which performs those automated test cases and then provides feedback on the quality, meaning you come up with a change, get direct feedback, and can react on that out of the context. And that's, again, this driver for the agility you get and this very tight feedback loops you can benefit from. And if everything is fine, you can, of course, perform a direct deployment or trigger a transport, like I've shown also in the demo briefly. And that's also something we show here, right? I mean, especially in enterprise environments, we want to allow you to also benefit from a standardized enterprise-ready change management process where you can, as an operations team, for example, say your development teams, okay, here's this pipeline or continuous integration delivery service, allows you to come up with a pipeline for your SAP use cases in minutes, not much cognitive load to actually keep it running, right? I mean, it's a service provided by SAP. Nevertheless, as soon as you come up with a qualified release candidate, I want to simply regain control towards production, because there you might have more strict boundary conditions, who's allowed to perform changes and and when and so on. And also you have a central space where you say, okay, all the changes are inside one repository. And in the end, you also open up the door to synchronize your cloud changes with, for example, on-premise changes, for which change management capabilities come into play. We are nevertheless open here as well. I mean, of course, manual deployment is something I would not recommend for enterprise environments. Direct deployment out of the pipeline can be one option, and we have also still change and transport system in an enhanced version for on-premise that can partly cover certain aspects of BTP as well. But our way forward is here the cloud transport management service, as we have more coverage there. And again, integration into strategic operations platform like Solution Manager or SAP Cloud LM that can then orchestrate the delivery also for the BTP parts. If you should not use those or have other ones in use, we have also open APIs that allow you then to also get orchestrated by ServiceNow or other frameworks, for example. To just stress that again, I mean, the idea is really to differentiate between a development landscape based on continuous integration principles managed by and owned by the local DevOps team, there with the goal to verify single developer changes and fully automated with the pipeline. Again, as soon as they come up with the qualified release candidate, you have then the handover into a delivery landscape, then based on strict transport management rules, who's allowed, when, and also have schedules there with the goal to verify the release candidate, and typically done with a manual confirmation where you might have a delivery manager that says, okay, now I prove that this change can be propagated into this production sub-account and store this also inside the system for auditing reasons, with the option to have that control from change management. And here you see the different teams, tools, I mean, the IDEs. For CICD, we have the continuous integration delivery service or open source third party with Project Piper. Here we have Cloud Transport Management Service or CTS if you only want to have development content artifacts. And here, the strategic operations platforms. At transport, the idea is that you have a logical representation here of your delivery landscape, meaning a node for every sub-account you want to handle. And then with destinations, and then you can have transport routes defined. The good thing is that you centrally define those transport routes, meaning it's clear the path the changes shall go. And you can again specify who's allowed to handle changes in which node. So that's also something the service does bring. And you have the central log file for the changes. And if then a change comes up, you just propagate it along the predefined delivery landscape. And have transparency on what happened there. Again, integration with CICD, integration with change management and open APIs. I don't show this service today because we will have the session next week from my colleague Harald Stevens on integrating cloud transport management into application lifecycle management solutions. So we will present the service in more detail and especially stress here this integration into SAP Cloud ALM. There you have corresponding change and deployment capabilities that allow you to orchestrate and BTP changes together with on-premise changes. Nevertheless, I also want to stress some of the latest news here. First of all, we came up with a transport-centric view. I'm pretty sure Harald will show next week where you see for transport, okay, for example, here we see it, we have successfully imported the change into the dev node. It's pending in the QA node, and it did not reach the production node yet, so that you can really follow easier the flow. The integration into Cloud LM will be shown as well next week for sure. We have now also enabled further content types. One example is you can also now transport BTP ABAP environment content, meaning steampunk content, with also the same approach. And the same is true also for SAP Build process automation content. And that's also already giving the direction where we want to enable all the different development use cases on BTP and handle that with a similar central approach. Meaning you can have one instance of the cloud transport management service that handles then the changes also from different global accounts, if you like. And on top, we have here as enabling service, this content agent service, which came up with a new UI where you can also then manually export things. That's focused on Cloud Foundry. Some of you might know also the solution export wizard on Neo. So that is similarly going into the same direction there. And overall, you end up with different levels then of control and agility. You might have use cases where you say, okay, I don't need change control or change management. I directly deploy out of my pipeline. And that is, of course, also something that is possible directly out of the box. If you need more control, then you just configure the handover from the pipeline into transport management, where then again can specify who's allowed to handle that and have centrally defined delivery landscapes. And if you have the need for change management, you let Cloud Transport Management get orchestrated from Solution Manager. Here we have change request management, charm, or quality gate management that then can also orchestrate on-premise changes in parallel, right? Or as mentioned, you let it orchestrate from SAP Cloud ALM. And of course, you can also have a stepwise approach, meaning you start simple and evolve by time if more strict boundary conditions should come up. Or you can have different use cases where you say, okay, for certain cloud native scenarios, I use direct deployment from the pipeline. For my business critical applications, I need change management for auditing reasons. And then you have that model here for those changes. That's all possible, of course, inside the different approaches then. So we have come up with the changes and propagated towards production. And now it's, of course, the question what you can give your development team so they can also reduce efforts for operating that. And here I want to stress two services. One is the alert notification service, which allows you to subscribe to events from the business technology platform and then get notified by the channel of choice. And with that, you enable a reactive way of working. And that's, again, also stressing the importance from DevOps point of view, where you say, okay, you should automate whatever you can and reduce manual efforts. So let's briefly look into that. Of course, as alternative, you have third-party offerings out there and manual monitoring, but the advantage we see here, of course, is this high integration into SAP BTP. We have seen in continuous integration delivery service, we just had to switch on the alerting and then you can consume those here. Same is true also for Cloud Transport Management service and for other services running on business technology platform. So how does that look like? Yeah, we have integrated here the different runtimes from BTP, be it Kyma, Neo, Cloud Foundry, and so on. We have also enabled a lot of different services. Then you can also get alerts from the infrastructure as a service providers. For example, if BTP is running on Microsoft Azure, then you can get also corresponding events from that one. You can come up with custom events that are also then offered by the same channels. And your DevOps or SRE teams go to the service and say, okay, I have to be notified about events from those services because I use them in this sub-account. And I want to be notified via Slack, Microsoft Teams, email, or I want to trigger directly creation of a Jira ticket, or I want to get it up into, for example, SAP Solution Manager or SAP Cloud ALM again. What you can also do is directly trigger an automated reaction, meaning a workflow or some kind of automated action that gets automatically performed. And that's also the second service I want to stress. That's the SAP Automation Pilot Service. That's some kind of low-code, no-code engine that allows you to really compile automated reactions. And for that, we bring catalogs of automated commands you can use. And that's, of course, also the key differentiator to third-party offerings. I mean, there are a lot of other offerings out there for automation of technical operation tasks, that's clear. But here, really, the key differentiator are those catalogs with several hundreds of commands you can use around typical SAP BTP use cases. That makes it easy to really tackle those use cases you want to reduce manual efforts with. And again, the idea is that you either have stored a command here inside Automation Pilot Service. Instead of manually performing it, you go to the service, trigger the command, and it gets executed in less time with less efforts and repeatable results. Think of handling HANA actions on several instances, for example. And that's not something you do then step by step, but you can trigger it then to get executed in parallel, for example. Another one is alert remediation, meaning an issue with your application does come up. Alert notification service sends you a notification via channel of choice, but it could then also directly trigger a recommended action on Automation Pilot Service, like restarting the service or performing auto-scaling. And finally, also around lifecycle management tasks like transports, you could perform pre or post activities automatically. So that just triggers whenever you perform a transport into a certain environment, that then a corresponding action gets performed. And you see, we have a lot of different use cases enabled around resource management, where you can come up with sub-accounts or handle corresponding entitlements and so on. Around HANA Cloud, there we have a very huge catalog around integration suite, around those lifecycle management tasks and so on. And we have many use cases, but we also see that it's sometimes a little bit hard to make the first steps here. And that's why we thought, okay, maybe it makes sense to give you some inspiration there as well. And that's also something we will offer as part of our series here, right? For that, my colleague Bisa Simonov will also come up with a lot of examples, with a lot of demo use cases. The first one starting on May 11th, where we will take a look at a typical cloud application using HANA Cloud and outline how you can use those services for synthetic monitoring. Then 2 weeks later, we will have a session around monitoring, alerting, and remediation for failed messages and events in SAP Event Mesh. And on the 1st of June, we will have a session around SAP HANA Cloud, where you can create monitoring and status report automatically as well. So you see a lot of different examples, but here you can really get hands-on examples and also links then to corresponding GitHub examples you can use and also start figuring out what you can do with those. And finally, of course, I want to stress also here, we have also here the integration option into the strategic operations platforms. And if you should have third-party offerings, we have open APIs for that as well. Okay. To summarize what we have seen, first I want to come back to that slide in the beginning. So we want to make it easy for you to make the first steps with this easy start and low entry barrier for which we bring this pipeline as service offering. You can really come up with a running pipeline without own CICD infrastructure in minutes for SAP typical use cases, and are still free, nevertheless, to evolve by time, to add further stages, to add further frameworks, and you can also export the pipeline if you want and also move it to another third-party offering, but you have started and gained first experience there. We have the highly integration. I mean, just to give you that example, I mean, from the IDE, you have seen you can trigger the pipeline or create a pipeline directly, which could then trigger a transport, which could then be orchestrated by change management for the orchestration towards production environments. We do respect existing operations processes. So if you have change management, if you have monitoring or the automation capabilities and so on, those can all be orchestrated then as well from Solution Manager and Cloud ALM and also Focused Run. And again, we have a clear focus on SAP use cases with the different pipelines, with the catalogs of commands we do provide. So really a focus, of course, on SAP BTP and related use cases around SAP S/4HANA. But now, as a final idea here, take a look at the vision. We have also an approach for on-prem here with the Git-enabled change and transport system that does allow you to also benefit from automated pipeline for on-prem. For BTP, we have the different services presented today. We do integrate with third-party and open source like Git-based repositories like CICD servers. We do control the propagation towards production with the right level of control in both environments. We want to handle all the different use cases on BTP, be it by coming up with CICD pipelines, be it by handling transport of the corresponding content artifacts, be it by allowing a direct integration into alerting, and by coming up with commands with automation pilot service for the corresponding use cases. Important is really we want to tackle really the different environments, meaning we have Neo, Cloud Foundry, Steampunk, Kyma, meaning we want to have a similar approach. Of course, there are slightly differences depending on the use case, but the similar approach for DevOps on the different environments so they can really stick to the same methods and concepts there in the long run. We have open APIs and integration into Solution Manager, Focused Run, and Focused and Cloud ALM. And in the long run, we also want to enable the SAP Cloud solutions, like, for example, SAP SuccessFactors, where you also can come up with, for example, content. And here we want to also enable you to handle that via a central transport management mechanism here with the Cloud Transport Management integration. If you now want to make first steps, take a look at the further information we do provide here, also as part of the series, of course. Then pick out a first project and a team that is interested in this more agile approach, then allow them to really gain first results, meaning that they really get an early feeling for success with the new approach, that they really can feel the benefit this more agile approach does bring. For example, by using the CICD service or having other approaches that they really can come up with compelling first results there. And then nevertheless, you can let them gain first experience, but as soon as they come up with release candidate, you can centrally regain control and integrate, like with switching on the handover into transport management, for example. And then, of course, scale, meaning you have validated that really the approach does bring the value you have hoped, and then you just come up with additional projects and think constantly about how to evolve, meaning if you have issues with your application, then think about, okay, do I have to add additional automated test cases? Do I have to add additional alerting so that get notified if an issue comes up? Or is there any action that I could automate to also remediate the issue then, and with that reduce manual efforts and be able to focus more on bringing actual business value with your development teams? Yeah, if you now want to learn more, here's a lot of different links. Of course, again, here to the series of the Open Space webcast. We have, of course, a community page. We have an Open SAP course. We have best practice information. We have hands-on video tutorials. You can also try out the service in the free tier, meaning you can try out those scenarios without charges, for which we also bring missions, tutorials, and also a booster, for example, for SAP Automation Pilot Service. And we have an influence session. Before we come to the questions, here again, the overview. So you have now seen the overall approach. Next week, you will gain further insights about how you can work together with transports, also for BTP, interplay with CICD, but also integration then into application lifecycle management like Solution Manager and so on. And then the next 3 occurrences will really focus and give a lot of inspiration and examples how you can reduce manual efforts by coming up with a reactive way of working with alert notification service and automating recurring manual tasks with SAP Automation Pilot Service. Of course, we hope to welcome many of you also in those upcoming sessions. But now let's take the last minutes for questions. Of course, you can also reach out afterwards if questions should come up later. But let's see if we have something already in the chat. I did not watch the chat, but Tanya, were there any questions or remarks already? Oh, I see a lot of comments from Bisa. Thanks a lot, Bisa, for helping out. And
So actually, yes, our colleague Bisa already answered quite a few questions, but there is one that is open.
Okay.
So for on-premise environment, do we need to go with Project Piper only, as we do not see a scenario in SAP CICD?
That's a very good question. I mean, right now, that's correct. I mean, right now we have Project Piper steps, for example, to clone repositories, create repositories, to perform deployments, ABAP test cases, or also perform rollbacks. But we are in discussion right now. We started the first project because we also think that's the right target group also for the SAP Continuous Integration and Delivery Service. So we have ambitions also to come up with a corresponding pipeline template there for on-prem ABAP development, which would, from our point of view, perfectly complement that use case as well. So look out for some announcements. I would say, maybe around SAP TechEd, we should be able to come up with something. Disclaimers, of course, applied, but of course, we really see that as well as a valid use case. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. And thank you for answering, Boris. We have another question. So SAP Build, we are new to SAP. And this solution, is this solution mature? What is the adoption?
Okay, I'm now an expert for SAP Build, but what I can tell you is that we are also that we are working very closely together also with those colleagues, because we think that's also a key differentiator compared to other offerings out there, where you shall also have the possibility to handle then the outcome of SAP Build, also with standard SAP means, meaning in terms of the life cycle. And one example, we are working there to also allow, for example, a transport, meaning a citizen developer can come up with an application there being built with SAP built apps. And there it's planned that then the operations teams can then, with the right level of control, also handle those and also bring those into the overall context and, for example, of an overall solution. From that point of view, yeah, I'm happy to make the connection, of course, there to the SAP Build colleagues who also provide a lot of information. We are using it as well inside of SAP, also extending that. Of course, they also have a corresponding roadmap. But what I can tell you is that it can really be a very important complement to pro-code development. Not saying that it's only for citizen developer, also for pro-code projects, it might be that a pro-code developer also says, okay, I build certain parts first with SAP Build and then bring it into an overall context. So from that end, yeah, that's really one of the cornerstones of the direction we also want to take here, because we just see it's, of course, getting more and more crucial to get talented developers from the market, right? And if you want to grow there, then of course, yeah, we have also to think about other approaches. So I can recommend that you take a look at that, and again, also take a look at the corresponding roadmap there in terms of integration with lifecycle management and DevOps, where we have also a lot of ideas as well and work closely together with the colleagues.
Great, thank you. I have actually also posted a link to a video which we
perfect.
did in the past on SAP Build.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Tanya.
So yeah, you should get more information there. And in the link in the video itself, you also find names from colleagues. And anyway, if you have any further questions, always feel free to use the comments part of the video, and we will definitely come back to you.
Yeah, I see there's another question, right? Bisa, you mentioned it. I should know, how is the integration with automation testing done, regression and so on? Yeah, that's also a very good question. I did briefly show it. I mean, we have this opinionated path, for example, with continuous integration and delivery, where we have certain frameworks where we say, okay, of course, there are many different frameworks out there for testing, but here's a path where we say, okay, that does work for SAP scenarios. If you do not know what to take, you can take that path and gain first experience and later on still adapt as needed. The integration is out of the pipeline then, meaning we have the corresponding means then to trigger corresponding test frameworks. We are also thinking about closely coupling with further frameworks there as well. But yeah, in principle, that's the way to go, where you say, okay, I start with a certain amount of tests on different levels, and that's also something, of course, you cannot come up overnight. I mean, that's also from that point of view, I'm very happy that you brought up this question. There's no silver bullet to that. But you should evolve by time, right? Come up with first test cases, and then you will gain experience and see, okay, was the outcome of the test case, did it really reflect the quality actually of my increment? And if not, what have I do to improve to move them closer together somehow, right? And then you will also evolve by time and improve the overall test coverage. And besides that, you should also think about compliance, boundary conditions, like I mentioned, security or performance or whatever. That is also something you can then, of course, foster then with corresponding test cases. And if you are struggling with increasing test coverage, you could, of course, also think about looking into development approaches like test-driven development or behavior-driven development that just make sure that you can use those more test-focused approaches. Sorry, again, I just have to mute again my phone. I'm not sure if you can hear it again. Annoying.
By the way, we don't have much time left, but there is one question in the chat. Boris, not sure whether you want to answer it now or then in the comments area.
Let me just check if the last question here, right? If we want to have a common solution for CICD for both on-prem and BTP, Piper is the best option. Yeah, if you right now wanted to have that, I must confess, yeah, that's true. I mean, right now we don't have an on-prem solution there. I mean, we plan to come up with something, but don't have it yet. But yeah, Project Piper would be a way to go. I mean, there are of course different offerings for different frameworks. It depends on where you're coming from. If you should have already some experience, then you can stick to that and use Project Piper, and you will see a lot of examples there as well, right? I mean, again, and still, I mean, you could still think about moving later on also into another direction. It's also a question which use cases you want to tackle first.
Okay, we are
Sorry.
now
Okay.
on top of the hour. So I would like to thank you very much, Boris, for your excellent presentation. It was really fun to listen to you and interesting in particularly. And of course, I would like to thank our attendees very much for joining. I hope this session was of value for you. And I hope to see you again in our next session next week, Thursday again, and same time, same place.
Thanks a lot for joining. Really appreciate it also for the many questions you came up with. And yeah, looking forward to welcome you in the future sessions as well. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Good evening. Bye.